Today in the Forge in Roblox, I have a tier list for you. Assuming all materials are equal, what weapon do you want and what weapon do you not want? If this sounds interesting to you, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. Become part of the first 300k OGs on the channel. Let's get into the video. So this is the tier list that I built, going from S tier down to D tier, talking about weapons such as the double axe, going all the way down to the katanas and the Dragonslayer, etc. And starting off, we have the double axe, which falls into the great axe category when you're crafting, and these are really bad. I'm gonna put the double axe in the C tier. Sure, it's decent, it's better than some options, but there's just so many weapons that you'd rather craft than the great axe category. And speaking of which, I can move ahead and grab the other great axe, which is the scythe. The scythe is right here. It is also in the C tier. Guys, if you're crafting weapons, go ahead and craft almost anything else. Moving on to our next category, we have the boxing gloves, which fall under the gauntlets category. Now, if you're intentionally crafting gauntlets, you're probably going in the wrong direction. There's a good chance you're going to accidentally craft gauntlets because you're trying to craft something like a katana or a straight sword, but you probably don't want to intentionally craft gauntlets. So the boxing gloves, in terms of their DPS capabilities, are actually here in the C tier alongside the double axe and the scythe, though they are just barely, I mean a fraction of a DPS better than the double axe and the scythe. Now, first up among all of our straight swords, we have the rapier, which is a 1 in 4 chance of crafting, and it is almost in the S tier. It is at the very tippy top of A tier. A fantastic DPS weapon, one of the highest DPSs in the game. Hard to craft with that 1 in 4 chance whenever you do a straight sword, but if you do manage to land it, sure, it's not the chaos sword, but man, is it a really good number 2. Then we have the regular dagger, the one that costs 3 ore to make, and it is in the C tier. Though, oddly enough, it does more DPS than the boxing gloves or the other axes. It's really strange. It is really quick. I mean, very quick, lightning fast. And as such, its DPS is actually fairly high. Are you intentionally crafting daggers? No. Even the best dagger is a pretty mediocre weapon. But at least the regular dagger you craft is actually not horrendous. Now, this weapon, the comically large spoon, is comically hilarious. I don't even know how you craft one. I think it's completely RNG. If you do manage to craft one, the DPS on it actually puts it in the B tier. It's nowhere near as good as any of the sword options, any of the other great sword options. Hammer, Skull Crusher, Dragonslayer, Greatsword, they're all way better, but it's still not bad. It's not nearly as bad as daggers or boxing gloves or other things. So with DPS, it's decent. So if you craft one, I guess you don't completely lose out, though you'd rather a Dragonslayer. Then we have the Crusader sword, which is part of the great sword category, which for me makes no sense because great swords are things like, oh, I don't know, the great sword, the hammer, etc. Why are there great swords and colossal swords? I don't understand the naming conventions here, but according to the great sword category, there are 2 weapons and they're both horrendous. I'll just go ahead and grab them now. The great sword and the long sword. Both of these long sword category one-handed swords are horrendous in terms of damage per second. Their damage is just too low and they're just too slow. Their DPS is the worst in the game. With the worst in the game, the longsword. This is the worst weapon in the game in terms of DPS. Do not craft the great sword category when you're crafting in the forge. Now we have something like the cutlass, which is another straight sword. When you're crafting, this has a 1 in 2 chance of being crafted, way better than the falchion, but it's not what you're looking for in terms of one-handed swords. I actually managed to craft a one-handed cutlass with Demonite. It's a fantastic sword, but it's still only a just above B tier sword. It does more DPS than the comically large spoon, assuming equivalent materials, but it's still just a pretty good sword, not a great sword. Next up, we have the falchion knife, which is basically the same DPS as a dagger and a gladius dagger. Take a look at my chart over here. So the falchion knife is going to fall right here with the regular dagger. I'll put one up because it's slightly rarer, but in terms of DPS, it is dead equal with the dagger. Now, the falchion sword is the disappointing role whenever you try to craft swords. This is the most common sword you craft, and its DPS is actually kind of mediocre. It's between the boxing gloves and simple daggers. Yes, you heard me. Equal materials. The dagger has less DPS than the falchion sword. It's really unfortunate. So whenever you're chasing after that chaos sword, every time you roll a falchion sword with your best materials in the game, it's a total miss. It sucks. So at least if you get a cutlass, it's not so bad, but the falchion swords are just, it's not fun. Moving on to the gladius sword. The gladius sword is also down here in the falchion sword category. It is not that great in DPS. But then again, how do you craft a gladius sword? Thinking back to the crafting menu, there's only 4 swords there, and the gladius sword is not among them. So how do you craft this? I don't know off the top of my head. The Gladius dagger is actually still better than the regular dagger or the falchion dagger. Again, they're equal in terms of DPS. They're all C-tier weapons. Try not to craft these things if you can help it. Now we're cooking with some gas. We're going to start talking about some of the great swords. The great swords in this game are colossal swords. Again, nomenclature is very weird in this game. Colossal swords are all pretty much unanimously quite good. So if you're doing some crafting and you want to trust in your RNG, you can definitely do great swords and hammers, etc. The great sword is an A-tier weapon. In terms of DPS compared to the rapier, it is beneath the rapier in terms of DPS. It's just like a combination of damage and speed, but it is still a fantastic sword. You can never go wrong crafting great swords in this game in terms of DPS. It's one of the best colossal swords, best swords in the game, period. Then we have the hammer, which is just beneath it in terms of DPS. It has a higher base weapon damage, but it is a good chunk slower. So the DPS comes out a little bit below the greatsword. So you'd rather have a greatsword than a hammer in terms of your damage per second capabilities. The hook is the rarest dagger you can craft, 1 in 16 chance. Therefore, its DPS is actually much better than the other daggers. It comes up in the B tier, and it's just beneath the cutlass in terms of DPS capabilities. So if you want to be different, you want to be a bit of a hipster, you want to roll something different, you can pray to get a hook, you keep shoving materials in there, you pray to get a hook, its DPS is actually respectable. The Iron Hand is the base gauntlet in the game, and it's actually the best DPS. Its base damage is lowest, but it is significantly the fastest. Its DPS is better than the comically large spoon, but it is beneath the hook and the cutlass. So if you get a regular old Iron Hand, it's a respectable weapon. So if you're trying to roll that katana and you only get the Iron Hand, it's not bad. What is kind of funny though is the Revelator. It's technically the rarest gauntlet you can get in the game to craft, 1 in 16 chance, but its DPS is kind of bad. Its damage is better than the other gauntlets, but it's so slow that its DPS brings it down into the falchion, knife, and dagger category. It's better than the daggers, but not by much. Now we have the Skull Crusher. This is one of the rarer colossal swords to make. But the problem is, it's so slow. Its damage is good. It's so slow. Its DPS knocks it out of the A tier and brings it into the top of B tier. It is better DPS than a cutlass, but it's not as good as the regular old basic greatsword. So if you're crafting colossal swords, you'd rather have the greatsword or obviously the Dragonslayer that we're going to talk about right now. The Dragonslayer is our first S tier weapon. The DPS on a Dragonslayer is just that much better than the rapier, the greatsword, or the hammer. There is a significant gap there. In fact, it is technically the highest damage per second in the game. Yes, it swings slower than a katana. It swings slower than a chaos sword, but its damage is so staggering, and it still swings relatively fast. It swings faster than the Skull Crusher hammer. It swings faster than the regular hammer. It swings just as fast as a normal greatsword, but does more damage than the normal greatsword, putting its DPS at the very tip top of all the weapons in the game. Now we're going to talk about the katanas. Both katanas are pretty much the same. They have relatively close damages and relatively close DPS and relatively close speeds. People like to craft katanas because of consistency. Whenever you craft a katana, you only get 1 of 2 options and their DPS is identical. Unlike when you're crafting great swords, if you happen to craft something like a cutlass or a rapier, you're pulling out a head, or a chaos sword, you're pulling out really a head. But if you craft a falchion, which is the most common straight sword, you're falling way behind. So katanas are popular for that reason. Whenever you craft them, you're guaranteed to get a really solid weapon every single time. But the lows are nowhere near as low, but the highs are nowhere near as high. In terms of damage per second output, the Tachi and the Uchigatana, hopefully I don't butcher these names, put them right in the middle. They're the perfectly middle weapon. They're just beneath the hook, the hook's a 1 in 16 chance. And they're just beneath the cutlass, but they're better than the regular Iron Hand. That's why you see so many people crafting them. You're always getting a very solid weapon every time you roll a katana. Having said that, there's a reason why people are rolling straight swords now. Because the rapier, the cutlass, and especially this chaos sword are better, significantly better than the katanas. Now, looking at the damage, I'm really tempted to put rapier in the bottom of S tier because its DPS is not that far behind the chaos sword or the Dragonslayer. The DPS difference between the Dragonslayer and the Chaos Sword is actually the same distance, the same numerical difference between the Chaos Sword and the Rapier. So I'm really tempted to put the Rapier in terms of the bottom of S tier. But having said that, the Rapier in terms of DPS is closer to the Greatsword than it is the Chaos Sword. So we'll keep the Rapier in the A tier. I would basically give the Rapier an A+. That's why, again, people are crafting two-handed swords, the Colossal Swords, and why they're crafting straight swords, because the highs are so high. You can get any of those 5 options are better. The Cutlass, the Rapier, and the Chaos Sword are all better than the Katanas, and most of the two-handed Colossal Swords are better than the Katana. Just whenever you're crafting that Katana, it's just so consistent, and the materials are so low compared to the Colossal Swords that need 2 to 3 times the materials, or the Straight Swords that whenever you roll a falchion, the falchion drops it. Where did it go? Falchion's way down here in C tier, so that's the problem with crafting Straight Swords. Hopefully, this tier list helped you. Hopefully it helps you figure out, okay, what do I want to craft? Do I want the consistency of the katana? Or do I want to roll big and try and get a really good straight sword? Or roll really expensive and try and get a fantastic colossal sword? Comment down below with your thoughts. Tell me what you think. If you disagree or disagree, let me know. And hopefully this was useful to you. If it was, go ahead and hit subscribe. Become part of the first 300K OGs on the channel. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.